Hey, what's up guys, Daniel from ModBot here, and in today's video, I'm going to show you my current resin 3D printing workflow. So, huge shout out to my Patreon supporters. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much for supporting my content and allowing me to spend more time doing what I love. Alright guys, so like I said, over the last month or so here, probably 2 months now, if not even longer, I've been doing a lot of resin printing with the AlphaWise W10 and now the Elegoo Mars. I've used a lot of different softwares, and I have been using this one right here, which is ChiTuBox, and this has been my favorite software by far. I'm using it pretty much exclusively now. So I figured I would take you guys through my workflow in a couple of different situations. There's a ton of predefined settings in here for various machines, as you saw. So the Photon's a really popular one, the Elegoo Mars, the SparkMaker ones, the Frozen Shuffle. But yeah, I'm going to show you guys a couple of different examples here of me importing models and kind of my workflow within the software, so you can kind of get familiar with the software and what I'm doing to get these models prepped and ready to be exported and printed. So one common example is I do a lot of 3D printing of busts. I think they are awesome, whether they are from a few really cool designers that do a lot of really awesome like superhero ones, and to like this one here, which is a really awesome resin high resolution detail of Albert Einstein. So first thing I do is import the model, then I rotate it into the orientation I want. In this situation, since the build plate is rectangular and I want this model to be as big as I can get it, I set it kind of the same format as the actual build plate. Then below that on the left hand side is a resizing tool, so it does show you which sections are outside of your build plate if you have a built-in profile for your machine, or whether you put your own specifications in. So just go ahead and resize that to about 80% of its initial size, and then you can also auto layout it, which I just put it center, which is going to be in the very center. So with resin printing, you have the option of doing a solid or hollow print. In this situation, there's no need for this to be solid. It's a waste of a lot of resin. So if you go to the top, there's a hollow button, and I've found that the default settings of 1.2 millimeters and inner work out wonderfully. So if you click on that and you click start, it'll go ahead and begin to hollow out your model. I don't know how long it'll take on your computer. My computer is spec'd pretty well, so it's relatively quick. But as you can see here, when it's done, it'll actually go ahead and take you from the top down of your model, and you can see the hollowness of the model. So 1.2 millimeters seems to be really good, so that the walls of the model are still relatively solid. Once you do that, you're going to want to add some drain holes. This is so that the resin can actually flow out of the hollow model and it doesn't become trapped inside. Pretty much the defaults are fine. I use circle, however, for the size, I found that increasing it to 3 millimeters seems to be a much better option. And by default, it has keep the circle, which basically, as you see here on the build plate, keeps that little chunk that it just removed from Einstein's head. Now, the only reason I can think you'd want that is if you're doing a bigger hole and you want it to print that hole so that afterwards you can kind of plug that hole. In my situation, I've never needed to do that, and in order to prevent risk of it printing that little plug and having it fall into my vat, I just go ahead and click uncheck keep the hole. So you will, in some situations, depending on the model, have to create more than just 2 holes. In this model, since it's just one big open chamber, 1 hole on top of the head and 1 hole on the bottom is going to be more than sufficient. You definitely want at least 2 holes, so that way air does not get trapped and the resin is able to flow out. But this is a perfect example of my current flow. If I'm doing a bust, I'm printing a bust, I do 1 hole on the top, 1 hole on the bottom, hollow it out, and it's ready to rock and roll. You have the ability to adjust a lot of different settings. So again, it does import, since the Elegoo Mars is in there. Under the layer height, you can adjust that. 50 microns is perfectly fine for, to me, a good happy medium between looking fantastic and not taking forever. You can go down to 25 microns on most of these machines, but all the other settings are just default. Again, since it has the profile for the Elegoo Mars built in, it takes out a lot of the work for me. I found that these settings work really well for the standard Elegoo resin. So I do a bottom layer count of 5. The bottom exposure time is 60 seconds for those 5 layers, and the exposure time for the rest of the layers is 8 seconds. Now, if you're using other resins, then you may have to adjust this. So I always recommend, if you're using a new resin on your machine, to go ahead and play around with a tiny print first and make sure you are getting successful prints before doing a huge print and finding out that your cure times are not correct. It does seem from the experience I've had so far that with translucent resins, I do have to increase the cure time just a bit, but that could just be my experience, and you may be fine using the same cure times for a more opaque resin and a translucent resin as well. So once you're happy with it, if you hit slice, it'll go ahead and slice up your model and generate all of those picture files. So it's really cool because you can actually see on the right hand side each single layer, and on the left hand side you can see the model as it climbs up. So I usually browse through this. I mean, I'm not looking at every single layer because there's, over 1,000 of them, but I can just see very quickly that if there was an issue like, oh hey, there's no picture here, obviously it didn't slice correctly. I think it's just a good thing to do, but it gives you some details like the time it's going to take and how much resin it's going to use. So yeah, that is one example. Another example of a lot of the prints that I do on the resin printer are minis. I don't really play D&D, but a lot of my buddies do, and I've just been having a ton of fun printing minis, so I imported this goblin. I'm going to rotate him at a 45-degree angle, and this is so that when I generate supports, the supports are going to be kind of on his backside and not on his face or underneath his arms, so they'll be easier to remove. I'm going to scale him up just a little bit, about 20%. And I'm pretty happy with everything else so far. I'm not going to go ahead and hollow him out. There's no need because he's such a small model, and I'm also not going to generate any holes, but I will need to create some supports. So on the right hand side, if you click on the support tab, you have a ton of options, and you can get really into the weeds if you want to. I've done light supports and medium supports, and I've had actually issues with them not holding my model, so heavy supports are what I use. But if you click light supports, you can actually just go around and click wherever you want and add your own supports. This is cool because as you become more familiar, you might decide that the software is generating just too many supports, and you feel more comfortable just adding the few supports that you need here and there. So as you can see, it makes it really simple to just click on the model and generate them, and it'll actually kind of connect them with each other. There's also a delete support tool, which is in the bottom middle. So if you do the auto generate supports and you say, hey, there's definitely too many, you can just go ahead and click on the supports you want to remove, which will highlight them in red. And then if you hit the delete key on your keyboard, it'll remove them altogether. So again, you can be as meticulous with this as you want. I typically have not done all of the manual stuff because I just don't really see a need, but yeah, so that was, again, those were examples of light supports, and the light support is really just the actual thickness of the stem and the part that connects with your print. This is medium, so as you can see, it's a little bit thicker, but again, for me, I've only really had luck with heavy supports. It seems to be the only ones that, at least with my machine currently, grabs the model, and these aren't really too hard to remove if you remove them before you cure the part, so there you go. And I also really like that on the bottom of the rafts for the supports, they are kind of at a 45-degree upward angle, which makes it really easy to get your spatula underneath and pop your part off. So another thing you can adjust is the Z lift, which by default is set to 5 millimeters. I believe it's in millimeters. Yeah, but I've typically dropped it down to about 2.5. That just means that you'll need less supports. Again, if you can really do whatever you want with this, but it lets you customize the top portion of the support, which is where it connects to your model, the middle portion, which is like the cone section, the bottom portion, which is the full long neck, and then the raft, which is the part on the very bottom, again with a 45-degree angle upward. So this model is ready to rock and roll. At this point, I'm just going to go ahead and slice and export. And yeah, that is really it. So those are the two types of workflows I do. I'm either hollowing and generating holes, or I'm just tilting on its side and doing the supports. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I'll place a link in the description to where you can download ChiTuBox for yourself and play around with it. I seriously think it is an incredibly powerful piece of software and really, really works nicely for resin 3D printing. Hope you guys, again, enjoyed this video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. If you enjoy the content, you want to support the channel, links will also be in the description to my Patreon. I've got some really awesome rewards, and again, I am super appreciative to anyone that does decide to support my channel and my content. And on that note, I will see you guys in my next video, and I am out. Peace, guys.